Okay, so hi Parker, thanks for joining. Thanks for sitting down to talk about your experiences the past week with the fires in LA. You
Yeah,
can,
of
if
course.
you want, just introduce yourself a little bit and how long you've been living in LA and what that's been like for you.
Yeah, so I moved out here after I graduated undergrad. I graduated in May. I lived in Maryland over the summer, and then I went to grad school at UCLA. So I moved out here in August. Um, so it's been about 6-ish months, I guess, a little less. 4.5. Yeah, so I've been here for like 4.5 months, and then my boyfriend moved out like 2 weeks ago. So he was here for like a week and then the fires hit.
Yeah, so when did you realize that something was wrong initially? Was this like was there a big lead up to this and getting an evacuation notice, or was it just very spontaneous?
So at UCLA, we were in class and everyone's phone started like buzzing that like alert bell that's like you need to it's like the Amber Alert bell. That's like I feel like what I normally get. My phone did not go off. It was like probably like it was a 65-person class and probably like 10 to 15 people had their phone go off. And it was like, there's a fire in your area, which was the Palisades one. And a lot of people that go to UCLA live like Santa Monica, Palisades area. And the way that it's located, it's like here's Palisades, here's Santa Monica, and then there's the 405 that runs right here. And I live like right here, like directly on the other side of I can see the 405 from my apartment. Um, so people's alarms started going off, and we're like, oh no, like there's a fire. And we knew that there was high winds because I got an alert like when I woke up in the morning that there was like a high wind when I checked my weather. So I was like, I'm gonna drive because I don't feel like walking in like cold wind. But that was all that I really knew. And then we took our lunch break and you could see smoke starting filling the air. And then my next class got canceled. And it was like, your teacher's evacuating, like your next class is canceled. So I get home and I'm like, I think this is like kind of bad. Like I've never experienced a fire and it's like 20 acres at this point.
Wow.
And which is like in the grand scheme of what the fire is, like the very early stages. Like this was at like 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday. This was Tuesday. I don't know that exact date, but it was the day that the fire started. I can pull it up on my calendar to get something more accurate for you. Um this was the 7th. Also my first day of classes for what it's worth.
Wow.
So this is the first day at UCLA on campus. Last class got canceled, so I head home and immediately turn on the news and we're like, what's going on? It's still pretty far from us, but it continues to grow, continues to grow, continues to grow. And do you want me to just like explain the whole story or do you want
Sure,
okay.
yeah, yeah, take it away.
Okay. Because I know you asked like how did it start? I didn't want to like
No,
go.
no.
Okay. Um, so we're like staring at the news and people start like texting, like, I'm leaving, I'm evacuating, and we're not in an evacuation zone or an evacuation warning. Parents are freaking out though, because they're like, it's really close to you. And on the map, it was really close to us, but we didn't leave yet because we're like, we're okay. It's they would tell us if we needed to leave. Then it starts moving east, which is closer to us. And we didn't get an evacuation zone, but UCLA like put out a thing. They had classes Wednesday and then they put out a thing that was like, we're not having classes Thursday. We're moving to virtual. And like, if you're able to evacuate, we recommend doing so. So that was kind of my telltale sign of like, let's go. Especially since like both of our parents were like, you should go, you should go, you should go. And we're like, no, like it's fine. Like people aren't leaving yet, people aren't leaving yet, people aren't leaving yet. So we go to Long Beach, we get a hotel, we stay there for 2 days. It looks like things are not going towards us. The news is saying it's not coming towards you, it's not coming towards you. Well, they're saying they don't think it's gonna jump the 405. So we go home, we unpack, we do like a bunch of laundry. We're home for like 5 hours. Evacuation warning hits and an evacuation zone. Like, so the way that there are zones, it's like a yellow area is a warning and then a red area is a zone. We're like 2 blocks from the like go zone. Like you need to leave right now. And we're in like the prepare warning, whatever. Mind you, they sent out evacuation warnings on accident twice. So at this point, I'm like, do we have to go? Because they already sent this out. And then they were like, never mind. But then there's this app called Watch Duty, and I can actually show it to you. I don't know if you have ever seen it, but it tracks like the fires and like what zones are evacuated. So this is what it looks like. It shows you like the map. So there's like the whole fire area, and you can see
Wow.
on here like all the zones. I don't know if you can.
And this is active right now.
Yeah, so this is like what it looks like today. I'm like this blue dot. So, but so I'm like out of it now. I'm in the clear. And it's not still burning, which is really good. It's not fully contained, which means they don't have a perimeter around it, but like it's completely burned. Like, so it's not still burning, if that makes sense. Like, there's not active flame. But we go onto that app and we're like, okay, so we are kind of in like a zone that we need to leave. So we were literally here for like 4 hours, repacked everything, left again. And at that point, like hotels were kind of like starting crisis like support.
Right.
So they offered like evacuation prices and all that stuff. So we were able to get like a super cheap hotel that was like relatively nicer. We have friends that live up in Burbank, but they were affected by the Eaton fire. Like they were also in evacuation zones. So we were like, we're just gonna go to a hotel. So we are in a hotel again for 2 more nights. And then they lifted the areas on like my side of the 405. And then we went back home, and we were back home on Sunday. So we were gone from Wednesday to Sunday. And then this whole week has been virtual. Well, my internship was in person, but school was virtual. And then school's going in person starting on Monday.
Okay.
Very long story, but there's
Oh yeah.
there it is.
You touched on two things I was curious about. So the first hotel you got was in Long Beach. Was that one pretty expensive, or was it getting scarce, or were you able to get it pretty easily at that point?
We were not able to get it easily. That's also another reason we left early. So the first 2 nights we were definitely erring on the side of caution. Tuesday we had looked at hotels because again our parents were so worried. So we were like, let's just look and see, have a backup plan if we do get into an evacuation area. And we had looked, and already things were like selling out like this, and like booking. We called a few places. And then as it started moving towards us, we were like, if we wait until we're in an evacuation zone, I don't think we're going to be able to get a hotel. And being that we've lived here well, I've lived here for 4.5 months, I don't know enough people to be like, oh, I can just go stay with a friend. Like my
Yeah.
friends live in this area, which basically all evacuated. And also the air was like really smoky, and like apartments started to smell. Luckily, my apartment has no ventilation. Didn't ever think that would be lucky, but it is. Um, so we weren't getting like a smell in here, but a lot of people in our like strip of apartments were starting to evacuate too, just because like you couldn't really breathe
Uh-huh.
inside or outside because of the smoke. But yeah, hotels are pretty booked. So it was definitely difficult to find the hotel. So that's why we booked it early. And then we were like, let's just keep it. Let's just keep it. And then we're like, okay, we're safe to go home. And then immediately we're like, and the Long Beach one was booked up for the other 2 nights. We went closer to LAX, which is still south of here. It wasn't affected by the fires. But it was near like Marina Del Rey.
Okay. And so you couldn't go to your friend in Burbank. Did your mom text you and say like, hey, if you need to, you can drive up north because she's a couple hours that way?
Yeah, so she had offered for me to stay there, and so did my sister because she's in San Jose. My mom's up near Sacramento. The issue was that I'm going to try to say this in the nicest way possible. The UCLA institution and my internship did not make a plan for virtual versus in person. And same with Ryan's institution of Ithaca. So we didn't know if we were able to just like leave for a week.
Right, yeah.
So it was kind of difficult to maneuver that because he had just gone out here. He had his orientations and his internship. And because like everyone was kind of in this state of panic, not really knowing what to do, it was like, we're virtual, we're canceled. Wait, we're in person. And like LA is so big. So where UCLA is, we were kind of affected. But like where my internship is, wasn't. Well, even though UCLA moves online, doesn't necessarily mean that my internship does. So that was always an option, but it was also like, can we actually do that because we have stuff that we still have to attend? Like life is still
Right,
moving
right,
in
yeah.
LA.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And were the roads like clogged in any way? Was it a bunch of people trying to get out, or was it pretty open and people could navigate throughout the city?
I know it was gridlocked by the Palisades, but it wasn't gridlocked on this side of the 405. We did drive and pick up two of Ryan's friends from the airport. They got in on Friday, I think. No, Saturday. They got it on Saturday. And since we were staying in a hotel by the airport, we picked them up from the airport and we drove them to Burbank. And at that point, their evacuation area had lifted. Um, and the roads weren't too bad. She said her flight was like completely empty. So I think that people were like avoiding things, but the roads weren't too bad. I was worried that they were going to be, but and I know that they were on the other side of the 405, like Brentwood, Santa Monica, Palisades area, but I don't know like on this side where it's like downtown Westwood was not.
Okay, and do you know anyone who does live up toward the Palisades or anyone who's like lost their home in the program that you're in at UCLA?
Yeah, there are people in our program or in our cohort that have lost their homes. And then my internship supervisor or and like the person that my boss at my internship, her cousins and her aunts and all of them, they all lived in the Palisades and her parents did too. They didn't lose their home, but it's very damaged, so they're not living there right now. They had to evacuate and they have like their house was affected, but it's not burned to the ground. But her cousins and them did. I don't personally know them, but yeah,
Right. Yeah.
she's been out of the office. And then I know we have like a Discord for our program, and in the Discord, there's been some people that said that their houses were seriously affected and burned.
So how does that make you feel? Like you said, there's sort of been, you kind of are having to continue on with life and manage all of the usual stuff, but also knowing that, people around you are really struggling and trying to manage those two things at once is a lot. So has that been something that you've been working through?
Yes. I feel like LA kind of came together during this time. To like support each other. So our teachers, for the most part, have been very reasonable, even being virtual. They've cut us some slack. UCLA did, or our MSW program did reach out and say our internship hours have been reduced by 16 hours, which is how many hours we work in a week. So technically, if you miss this whole week, it didn't count against you. Um, and there's been lots of resources shared on like how you can get involved with volunteering for support. They've sent out links to like Red Cross, different organizations that are like accepting volunteers. There's an evacuation shelter like on my street, just a little bit over, and I have not gone yet, but one of my friends that lives right on my street did go. And it's run through Red Cross, and she said that like they have so much stuff there, from like water to snacks to food and books, and it seems like so many places are just taking in stuff. We just today in my internship, we just went through our bookshelf and donated a bunch of books to people in the fire. So definitely coming together as a group to support people. And I know that there's some free therapy that is being offered for victims that were affected by the fire too.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And so, in all of this, also, there's been a lot of narratives kind of emerging about why this happened, if it could have been prevented. It's sort of become a politicized thing. And I don't know how much you have or haven't been following that, just in light of the practical stuff of having to evacuate and all this. But I'm curious if you've heard of any of those kinds of narratives and if any of them resonate with you, anything from climate change, the city's brush management, arson, there was really high winds, and the Santa Ana winds is kind of something that's predictable-ish. So I'm curious if have you heard anything about potential causes of the fire and how do you feel about those different examples?
Yeah, so I know that the Kenneth fire, which was like north of me and north of the Palisades one, was arson. There's an open investigation right now on that. Uh, I watched them do that on the news on KTLA, which is like the local LA news source here. Um, and I know that there's some theories about arson for the other ones. I have no idea. The only reason I even know that one was arson is because they like are in the midst of proving it. Um, I don't like there hasn't been a verdict, but they do have someone arrested for that. And you can check my facts on that. But I did see that on KTLA. Um, the winds here are bad, and we've had no rain since I've moved here. Um, I have not seen any rain. Obviously, I've been to Maryland a few times since I've been here. So, but I heard too on the news like it hasn't rained in like 8 months or something like that. Um, I think I think that the world that we live in right now, people really like to point a finger at something specific to explain all of the tragedies that happen, whether that's a political tragedy or something that's a little bit more minuscule. I think like the humans naturally, like our natural instinct is to blame someone and to look at like, well, whose fault is this? And to they need like something to put their anger towards. So it has to be a person or it has to be someone's fault. Um, but if we look at like basic like science, when there's really high winds and there's a very dry area, it is not shocking that there was a fire. But I'm so unfamiliar with how these fires work. I've been hearing a lot of people say, like, usually when there's fires like this, there's like three in California that are big, but all in different parts of California. It's never like three big fires all at one time in LA. But that we also never been through like a pandemic like COVID. So it's like I don't know. But like I mean, it was kind of set up for a natural disaster to occur like this, I think. And climate change is real. I believe in climate change. And if we look at what scientists have been telling us for years and years and years, like these were the worst hurricanes we had in Florida, and now we're having the worst wildfires. And I mean, we have damaged our environment, not you and I personally, but like multinational corporations for years and years and years and years and years without even realizing it. It's not a shock that when you have eight months of no rain and then really high winds like the Santa Ana winds, that something catastrophic is bound to happen, whether that's a policy failure, arson, or something that could have been prevented. I don't know, but that's kind of where I take it. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. It definitely does. And have you heard anything in particular about people kind of pointing fingers at, maybe this is correct, I don't know, but they've been identifying that homelessness could be a factor in this. People have even suggested that some of the arsonists might have been homeless. And so I'm curious if, I don't know, have you heard anything around that? And how does that land with you? Do you think that it might be a contributing factor to all of this or not?
Yes and no. Bear with me as I try to explain what I'm thinking. This is like winter in LA right now, and there are a lot of like homeless fire pits that happen. Um, where like people that are living on the streets will come together and like make a fire pit to stay warm. Um, I know like East Coast, you're probably like it's not that cold because it's not super cold here, but for LA it's pretty cold. It gets down to like 45 at night. Um, Something like that with high winds wouldn't be a shock to me. There are fires near my internship. There was a fire that was caused by that just a few weeks ago, and it was put out like this. It was super. It wasn't big at all. Like it wasn't on the news, nothing. But I know that that has happened before. I'm not to say that that's what caused it, but I know that that stuff does happen. My reasoning for saying yes, that could be the case, but also I don't want to put the blame there is because homelessness has been a problem in LA for a very long time. And I don't even know the extent of it, being that I've only been here for a little bit of time. But everything I learn in my program and just living here and talking to people and working in like a school district that has a majority homeless population, this system is set up to keep classes divided. So like it's very hard to find a house in LA right now for a reasonable price. There's no public transportation. The public transportation that is here is very, very minuscule. Like it's just a horrible setup. Like, and that's not just LA. Like in the US, there's a lot of homeless people. So to point blame like they started the fires, okay, why were they on the streets to begin with? I think is like a better question to ask. And like we put them in a situation, not we, but like this
Right.
country is in a situation where homeless people have to sit there and make a fire to stay warm at night instead of like the millions and millions of dollars that this country has to put towards bettering people's lives and providing stable homes and providing food and all of those things. So I think it's like it's a little disheartening for me. I have definitely also seen the narrative at the volunteer shelters that are offering people that have lost their homes, like all of these resources. And they're like, these aren't for homeless people. And it's like, it is for homeless people. It's for people that lost their homes. That's homeless. So it's a fine line. And I've seen some stuff circling on like Twitter or social or Instagram that's like, these resources are only for people that were homeless affected by the fire. And it's like, if we look at the reasons why every single person is homeless, it's all probably related to something corrupt that could be pinned back to an inadequate system that is set up on capitalism, whether that's from drugs or a natural disaster or like poor access to education or redlining. Like there's so many things that it's like, are we really going to offer food to the people that lost their house in the fire, but not the person that has been without a home for 9 months? It doesn't, it kind of baffles me. But that's kind of the narrative that I've seen.
Yeah, and part of the reason I ask is because it kind of reminds me of in San Diego, there was also sort of this like it was very evident problem of homelessness, but people didn't really want to touch it or go there for whatever reason. And I kind of felt after living there for 4 years that people had this resistance to like a psychological barrier toward addressing and really looking at homelessness because you realize very quickly that that could be you in an instant. Like there's so many circumstances that could lead to someone being homeless, and I think people don't want to psychologically go there, and so it's better to just like keep it the problem at a distance, or see it as like that's them and this is us. When really, like you said, the boundary between any one person having a home and not having a home could be like a fire. It could
Yeah.
be an overnight thing that happens.
And and with the Super Bowl coming here and the Olympics coming here, all really soon, there is a push to get homeless people off the streets. And that has been a push like in politics on both like the right and the left, of like how to solve this homeless crisis. And the fires only escalated it. And I will say, like, if you're not watching the news, you wouldn't really know what's happening. Like the air quality's bad or the winds are crazy. So that's also why it's like it's a little bit of a stretch to fully blame someone for like a fire if it was like purely like to keep them warm when they didn't may have not even known that the Santa Ana ones were happening if they're not if they don't have a phone or they're not like all these things. But politics is definitely geared towards how to get homeless people off the streets, whether it's in a way that is ethical or not. It's definitely happening very rapidly. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how that kind of shifts after these fires with a mass amount of homeless people just continuing.
So, how have you felt about LA's leadership and politicians in particular, whether that be the mayor, the fire chief, or the governor? Have you been looking toward any of those people for guidance or information of any kind, or has it kind of just been extra noise among, the scrambling?
Honestly, I mainly listen to the fire chief through all of this because they're the expert in the situation. Um, I don't know how fire works. I don't know how weather works. I don't it's not my expertise. I don't have a degree in it. I haven't worked my way up in that realm. So that's kind of who we were listening to a lot. I know that she has gotten a lot of hate uh, for how she's handled things, or I mean, there's a slew of things that just go on with anyone, like no matter what side someone's on. Again, the world we live in, they're going to hate on whoever this is, like the hurricanes in Florida were the governor's fault, and then this is the governor's fault. And we have a Republican governor versus a Democratic governor. Like they're two different states with two different parties, and it's still the governor's fault. Like that's how the rhetoric continues. Like everything is just like, let's point blame here and here and here.
Mhm.
I have not followed Gavin Newsom enough to kind of know everything he did here, but I know that he has been like he was on the news, he was making an appearance, he was helping where he could. Um, yeah, I honestly I was so like kind of overwhelmed with like, okay, we're packing up our stuff. Okay, we're getting renter's insurance. Okay, we're ordering a air purifier. I need a go bag. That I wasn't really looking into all of the politics, but I do know that he was like in the press conferences on the front lines. And I know the mayor wasn't in LA when it started. Again, I know she got a lot of hate for that. I don't know enough about her. I've only been here for a little bit of time. A fire is destined to happen with the current climate whenever. So I don't really know if her being here or not being here when it started was like catastrophic. I know some people do think it. I feel like I don't have enough of an opinion. But I did definitely listen to the fire chief the most. I just think like again, the expert in the situation is her. It's not a politician.
Mhm.
Like a politician can't tell me how it works unless that's what their focus is. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And another narrative that is sort of emerging out of this is there have been some, especially in Gen Z, who are kind of looking at the Palisades neighborhood and saying like, oh, well, all of them who live up in the Palisades have a lot of money, therefore this isn't really that catastrophic. Like they'll be fine, they can handle it, etc. Personally, I, find that narrative troubling, and I've even told a couple of people, like, actually, I have a friend up who goes to UCLA who's living in that area, like Santa Monica, Palisades, not in the Palisades, but close enough to have to evacuate, and like, I don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily like put you in that category, and I think even if you were in that category, I think it would be really problematic to minimize people's suffering because of what like wealth categories or status they have. So I'm curious what you think about all that and if there is any foundation whatsoever to the narrative that people losing their houses are mostly wealthy.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I don't know when we as a country and as a world have created this narrative that like the amount of money that you have dictates the amount of suffering that you deserve. Like, yes, there are famous people that live in the Palisades that have lost their houses. That is still horrible. yes, there are people that had no money and didn't have a house before and now are and like have all these health conditions breathing in that air and are still homeless, and that is still horrible. And like this notion that like the amount of wealth someone has dictates the suffering that they should have in their lifetime is like so messed up on so many levels that like it actually like is just so sickening to see that that's kind of where we're at, and honestly scary. Like, why as a country are we this divided? um but I mean, it's also not the case. Like, there's so many people that live in this area that are not wealthy. There are so many people that are. I mean, LA is a wealthy place to live, yes, but it doesn't mean that everyone that lives here is wealthy. There's plenty of people that are on food stamps, that are like barely making ends meet. It's like it. I don't know if you think that like actors are making like multi millions of dollars like on a daily to just like be able to throw around, well, they'll just rebuild immediately. Like, you have no idea how acting works or how Hollywood works because that's not what's happening. But even if that were the case, like, they still need to rebuild from scratch. So even if it's just their okay, it's just their house, they'll rebuild. It's still their house, and now they're without a house, and they're having to pay money for a hotel. And like, yeah, that whole narrative is one that I just did not like at all. I don't think it's there's no empathy at all. Like, as humans, we should lead with empathy in a lot of the things that we do, and assuming that because people have money means that they can survive this and it's all fine and we don't need to care and what they deserve it because they'll just rebuild anyway is just a lens that has zero empathy, and I just don't like looking at humans like that.
Yeah, totally. And I probably have one or two more questions before we go. Also getting
And
down
if
to
you need to renew the time or if you need to redo the Zoom, we can.
okay. Yeah, I
Sorry,
think
I talk a lot.
I know, no, you're totally good. I think we can get it in, but we'll see. So you've only been there for a couple of months at this point. I'm curious, how does this experience shape your perception, your expectations, or the hopes that you had for LA? Is it something that is gonna probably weigh on you for a long time, or do you think things will be back to relative normal quickly? How do you feel about that currently?
So, okay, I don't know if this fully answers, but I've been reflecting a lot on like how I mentally see LA. And I do think that this shifted my mental perspective on LA. Um, when I moved out here, this was like a fairyland. Like, it was almost like too good to be true. Like, oh, like all my problems will be fixed when I go to LA. And I think a lot of people that like freshly move here have a similar experience, that it's like, well, it's the beach and it's palm trees and everything is sunshines and rainbows. And I think that faded a little bit when I started grad school and was like, oh, like I gotta really like lock in. But it definitely faded, I think, during this fire of like I'm still in reality. Like, the world is burning literally and figuratively in a lot of ways, between the actual fires, but also between just fighting amongst mankind and where our priorities are and saving the people around us. That it kind of definitely hit me of like, okay, I'm still in reality, and this is very much in reality. It kind of, and I don't want to say like grounded sounds like it was good and it wasn't, but it definitely was like, okay, I need to like check myself because this is not la la fairyland. Like, this is like really like I actually live here and I actually had to evacuate. And this is not just like a fun summer vacation that I've been on for 3 months. Like, it when I had to buy renter's insurance, that was like, okay, I'm a real adult that has to live here. Like, I need to figure this out. Like, so I think just like mentally shifting my perspective of like this could happen anywhere. It it's not like this fantasy world out here. It's still like it's great, and I really love LA for a lot of things, but it's not it's not all sunshines and rainbows, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and other people I've talked to have compared it a little bit to the pandemic in the same way that it kind of was this confrontation with a difficult reality, as you said. So do you feel that parallel at all between like having to go into lockdown and having to evacuate, maybe?
Yes, definitely with online learning. Like I hate virtual with a burning passion, and all my classes have been on Zoom. And they're advising everyone to wear masks outside. Um, so it's like almost like opposite because you're not wearing them inside. Like it's like people are like running with masks on and like walking with masks on. It definitely depends on the area that you're in. But yeah, it's a weird, like eerie feeling. And I think also too, being in like the field that I am with social work, we've done a lot of talking, especially at my internship, of like, how do we support people every single day, knowing that like every single day is in a way like a traumatic experience in the world that we exist in. And I think that that is something that I also thought about during the pandemic. Like, is this the new normal? That like we live in a pandemic and there's all these political issues and like all of this stuff. And then like it's been barely 5 years since the pandemic. And I'm kind of back in this like, okay, I need to be supporting people and people need to be supporting each other every single day because we're living through trauma, basically.
Yeah, and we only have a minute and 20 left on this.
Sorry, we can redo it if you want to.
No, absolutely. You're so good, but I'm curious about how do you do that when you feel like you're constantly experiencing new trauma that you're going to have to grapple with and work through? How do you personally deal with that?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. I think the most important thing is to be filling your bucket before you fill someone else's. I mean the saying of like you can't water a plant with you know what I'm saying I'm talking about. Like you can't water a plant with an empty bucket. Um, Figuring out ways to fill your own bucket. Sometimes that looks like helping other people. Sometimes that looks like taking a self-care day. Um, yeah, I think it's something that I haven't fully thought about until recently of like, wow, I mean, I'm entering this like profession and I'm like, okay, every single day is a new trauma. And especially like with the current administration that's about to take office, I think there's a lot of people in this area that are really worried. So it's about figuring out how can I support myself while still supporting them.
Gotcha. Okay, this call is probably going to